You know, we tend to think of the world map as this fixed, permanent thing. But what if I told you it's being redrawn as we speak? Not by old-school explorers, but by our changing climate. Today, we're going to look at 5 real places that scientists are warning could literally vanish within our lifetimes.
Look, this isn't some science fiction movie plot. This is a stark reality, and it's backed by hard climate data. We're talking about entire cities and even whole countries, places that are home to millions, full of culture and history, that are now facing the real threat of being wiped right off the map.
And I want to be super clear here. This isn't some wild guess about the distant future. It's all based on current, measurable data from organizations like NASA and the UN. They're tracking rising sea levels and something called land subsidence, which basically just means the ground itself is sinking. The changes are already happening, right now.
Okay, so let's start our tour in what you could call the urban flood zone. This is where some of the world's biggest cities are fighting a daily battle against the sea. And for some of them, well, it's a battle they're already losing.
First up, Miami, Florida. Now, the problem here isn't as simple as just building a bigger seawall. It's something much deeper, and it raises a really tough question about the future of America's coastal cities.
See, Miami's biggest problem isn't just water coming over the coast. The city is built on top of porous limestone, which acts kind of like a giant sponge. So as sea levels rise, salt water is literally pushed up from underneath the ground. That's why they get floods even on perfectly sunny days. And the money is already reacting. Insurers are pulling billions out of the region.
30 inches. Let that sink in for a second. That's the projected sea level rise for Miami by the year 2050. It's a challenge on an almost unimaginable scale.
All right, now let's head across the Atlantic to Venice, Italy. The question for Venice is really about its soul. Can it stay a living, breathing city, or is it going to become a kind of floating museum, one you can only visit when the tides are low enough?
Just like Miami, Venice is fighting a war on 2 fronts. On one hand, the city itself is sinking, just about 1 to 2 millimeters every single year. Doesn't sound like much, but it adds up. At the same time, the sea is rising, which makes its famous Acqua Alta floods way more frequent and severe. They've built these massive flood barriers, which are an engineering marvel, but a lot of experts fear they're just buying time.
Now for a situation so extreme that the government's response is just jaw-dropping. We're going to Indonesia, where the problem isn't just flooding, it's that the ground is literally disappearing from under one of the biggest cities in the world.
Okay, get this. Up to 10 inches. That's not over decades. That's how much some parts of Jakarta are sinking every single year. It's mostly because they've been pulling too much groundwater from beneath the city. It is, without a doubt, the fastest sinking city on the planet. And the result is something that's never really happened before on this scale. The Indonesian government has decided to just abandon Jakarta as its capital city. They're building a brand new one called Nusantara on a completely different island. It's a stark admission that for parts of Jakarta, the battle is already over.
So we've seen how bad it is for these huge cities. But what happens when it's not just a city at risk, but an entire sovereign nation? That's when the stakes become truly existential.
I mean, can you even wrap your head around that? An entire country having to find a new place to live? For the people of the Maldives, a beautiful island nation in the Indian Ocean, that isn't some hypothetical question. It's the challenge that will define their very survival.
The reason the Maldives is in so much trouble comes down to one simple, terrifying fact. A staggering 80% of its land is less than 1 meter above sea level. There's almost no high ground to retreat to, so even a tiny rise in the ocean has a massive, massive impact.
In response, the government there is doing something pretty extraordinary. They've actually started a fund to buy land in other countries, like Australia or India. It's basically a national insurance policy, preparing for a future where they might become a nation without a homeland.
And the Maldives is not alone, far from it. Over in the Pacific Ocean, the nations of Kiribati and Tuvalu are facing the exact same threat on pretty much the same timeline. Their very existence is now in question.
For Kiribati and Tuvalu, the crisis is a double whammy. It's not just about floods covering the land. As the sea rises, salt water seeps into the ground and contaminates their freshwater supply, which ruins their crops and their drinking water. Some of their islands are already gone for good, and the scientific projection is that both nations could be completely uninhabitable by 2050.
So let's just pause for a second and absorb what we've seen. Miami, Venice, Jakarta, the Maldives, Kiribati, Tuvalu. The message is painfully clear. The world map that we all take for granted is not permanent at all.
This timeline really shows how this is all expected to escalate. By 2030, that sunny day flooding we see in Miami could be normal for coastal cities all over the world. By 2040, climate migration is likely to become a massive global issue. And by 2050, we face the very real possibility of watching the first sovereign nations disappear beneath the waves.
So why should this matter to you, even if you live far from a coast? Because these aren't just isolated events. They create global shockwaves. We're talking about major disruptions to the world economy, migration crises on a scale we have never seen before, and the permanent, irreversible loss of entire cultures and human histories.
We are living through a moment where the planet's geography is changing right before our eyes. The evidence is clear. The consequences are escalating. The question is no longer if this is happening. The only question that's left is how we're going to respond.